Hey guys, today we have an important debate to settle. The Google Pixel 6 versus the Google Pixel 6a. Two mid-range phones priced at $599 for the Pixel 6 and $449 for the Pixel 6a. This phone was actually just recently launched and its features are almost exactly the same as the Pixel 6, which is why a lot of you may be wondering if there's actually a big difference with that $150 premium. Now, I'm just gonna give the verdict straight away from the start. If you care about the 90Hz display or the very slightly sharper photos and slightly better low-light performance, go for the Pixel 6. If you don't care about that, save yourself some money and go the Pixel 6a because everything else is pretty much exactly the same, and I mean shockingly the same. Let's dive into the details though and see exactly what their differences are. Let's start with the hardware and design. Kicking it off with the Pixel 6, this was the model that Google really took a giant step forwards in terms of design. The past phones have always been boring and safe, similar to other devices on the market, but all that changed with the Pixel 6. They scrapped the cameras on the upper left and instead slapped on a giant horizontal camera bar that goes completely across the phone, making it look sorta like an Among Us character. Now, I admit it does look a little weird at first, but the design does grow on you once you get used to it. This makes the phone stand out and gives it a unique identity, just like the iPhone notch. The camera bar is actually very practical too, as there's no more wobble when you place the phone on a table, and it actually does act as a ledge on your finger to rest on when holding the phone. The buttons are also super clicky and satisfying to use even when it's in a case. And lastly, the three color options available for this phone are Seafoam Green, Kinda Coral, and Stormy Black. The Pixel 6a on the other hand follows the exact same design concept. It's a slightly smaller phone that's much lighter to use as it uses a plastic back instead of glass, which Google calls a 3D thermal-formed composite back. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Doesn't plastic feel cheap? First of all, Google did a good job with making the back feel almost like glass, but less slippery and grippier. And second of all, most of you people will be putting this phone in a case anyways, so you won't be feeling it during usage. It also makes the phone 30 grams lighter and more durable to drops, which is actually more beneficial than glass. The Pixel 6a also uses the same aluminum frame, which feels solid, and the same metal buttons, which feel super clicky and not mushy. The camera bar is also pretty unobtrusive compared to the Pixel 6, as it barely sticks out of the body and allows the phone to lay almost perfectly flat on a table. As for the color options, this phone is offered in Sage, Chalk, and Charcoal. Now, flipping over to the front, the displays, in which both of them are actually very similar. With the Pixel 6, you're getting a 6.4-inch 1080p AMOLED display, which looks decent. The colors are nice and punchy, and 1080p is still perfectly fine as it's nice and sharp. The panel also goes up to a brightness of 500 nits and 800 nits with HDR content, which is respectable, but it does mean that the phone does struggle a little bit in bright situations outdoors. Lastly, there's also a 90Hz panel, which does make the phone feel and look faster as you navigate around the phone. The Pixel 6a display, on the other hand, uses a 6.1-inch 1080p OLED display. Other than being a slightly smaller display, the colors and brightness output looks exactly the same when compared to the Pixel 6, which is good news as you're not sacrificing on any image quality. The only downside is the downgrade from 90Hz to 60Hz, which is one of the biggest controversies the Pixel 6a has to live through. What happened was, one of the biggest tech YouTubers, Marques Brownlee, called it, and I quote, "one of the choppiest displays purely coming from my decade of phone testing experience," as he compared it on screen with the 120Hz display of the iPhone 13 Pro, a phone more than double the price tag of this one. This led to tech enthusiasts trashing the phone and making outrageous claims about the phone being unusable. But here's the thing, if you're not a tech enthusiast, it doesn't matter. Most of you came from a phone with a 60Hz display that we've been using for the past decade, and you're definitely not going to notice a difference during daily usage, nor is it worth paying the premium for. As for unlocking the phones, both of these phones actually come with under-display fingerprint sensors, and unfortunately, neither of these phones support Face Unlock, which is a huge miss from Google. Now, here's the thing, when the Pixel 6 first came out, the fingerprint sensor was known for being very slow and often failing to unlock fingerprints. Luckily, Google solved that with an update, and now it's decently fast and reads my finger like 95% of the time. And with the Pixel 6a, Google did manage to bring an improved fingerprint sensor, being maybe the slightest bit faster and more accurate than the Pixel 6, although it could also just be a placebo. Unfortunately, as of right now, there is a fingerprint bug affecting a small number of users where the sensor would just unlock with any fingerprint. While I haven't experienced that myself, I'm sure it's something that Google will fix soon with the next few software updates. And for the last of hardware, both of these phones have great stereo speakers and top-of-the-class haptics with very minute differences between them. For the stereo speakers, they both actually get pretty much equally loud in volume, and the good thing is the earpiece volume is equal to the bottom firing speaker, which makes sure that the stereo effect is balanced. But due to the Pixel 6 being slightly bigger physically, the speaker does have a slightly fuller tone to them. As for haptics, they're both among the best you'll find on any phone, but because the Pixel 6a is smaller and maybe a little more dense, the haptics feel even sharper and more precise than the Pixel 6, which is actually a good thing. Now here's where the differences end between the two phones, the performance and the software. Both of these phones use Google's new flagship Tensor chip with really powerful AI for smart features and smooth performance. Apps open up very fast, animations across the UI are very fluid, and I haven't noticed much stuttering or lagging if at all with either of these devices. Apps also stay open in the background most of the time, which means you won't have to constantly reload apps when switching between them. Now, there also have been some talk about the Tensor chip causing these phones to overheat with usage, but I can tell you that it only happens with extended continuous usage, and it does make the phone warm to the touch. But honestly, speaking from experience, it happens with other phones like my S22 as well, and isn't a big issue in my opinion. These phones also run Android 12 on Google's amazing Pixel UI, which is an absolute treat to use. While I'm not going to go into the details of Android 12, I will say that all smart features from the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro are brought down to the 6a, like call screening, which lets Google Assistant take unknown calls instead and helps you avoid scam calls, and best of all, an insanely powerful voice dictation feature on the Pixel 6 series. With this special voice dictation feature, Google is able to make transcriptions incredibly fast and accurate and all offline. It can even fix grammar mistakes, do auto punctuation, and even send by voice. It's been an absolute game changer for me as it often replaces finger typing, especially when my hands are busy or I need to reply to many YouTube comments at once. I'm really glad Google didn't withhold any features from the Pixel 6a. And as for battery performance, I think both of these phones do decently well. It's definitely not going to surpass the insane battery life of iPhones, but it does do well compared to my S22 and other Samsung devices I've used in the past. The Pixel 6a also does edge out the Pixel 6 in battery life ever so slightly because of the lower refresh rate and smaller screen. And after using the Pixel 6 for almost a whole year and the Pixel 6a for a couple of weeks now, I average a respectable 5 hours of screen on time a day. Both the phones definitely last me through a whole day and even a day and a half with some really light usage. And finally, the cameras, which is probably the most shocking part of this comparison. To start off, the Pixel 6 and 6a actually share the same camera arrangements with a wide and an ultra-wide camera on the back and a selfie camera on the front. The two phones also share the exact same sensors for the ultra-wide and selfie cameras, with the only difference being between the main sensors. The Pixel 6a uses the old trusty 12 megapixel sensor that's been a part of all previous Pixels since the Pixel 2, while the Pixel 6 gets a new 50 megapixel sensor that's bigger and capable of taking sharper photos with improved low light performance. Well, that's what was supposed to happen. You see, when I started comparing the same photos taken between the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6a, I noticed that the pictures looked exactly the same. Typical of Pixel photos, the cameras are extremely consistent with everything being evenly exposed and having punchy and vibrant colors. And it also appears that both the phones use the same exact image processing, even though they both use different sensors. What's crazier is the fact that when I zoomed into the photos taken from each device, I actually found that the Pixel 6a matched the sharpness and detail from the 50 megapixel sensor on the Pixel 6. This is a huge find because that means the Pixel 6a doesn't really have an inferior camera compared to the Pixel 6. There are a few scenarios where the Pixel 6 does edge out the Pixel 6a for details in areas like shadows, but there's such a minor difference that you can barely tell. Same with low light performance, which shocked me the most. After processing, the details and noise levels are surprisingly similar despite the larger sensor size of the Pixel 6. The same goes with the ultra-wide and the selfie camera. And because of this reason, using the cameras as an excuse to upgrade to the Pixel 6 just isn't a valid argument anymore. And based on what you've seen throughout this entire comparison, the only noticeable difference is the change from 90Hz to 60Hz, which brings the question, are you willing to pay $150 for a slightly higher refresh rate? And I bet you the majority of people will not think it's worth it, and because of that reason, I can confidently recommend the Pixel 6a over the Pixel 6 without a doubt. You can use the $150 you save for a nice pair of earbuds or some additional accessories too. The Pixel 6a has also actually been the more comfortable phone to use due to it being 30 grams lighter than the Pixel 6 and having a smaller footprint as well. And that basically wraps up my comparison. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with my analysis or if you guys have any questions about either device. And if you enjoyed this video as well, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button for more awesome content from me. Alright, have a good one and I'll see you guys in the next one.